put that same fuel on trucks and transport them through our communities at a far greater cost as opposed to using the pipeline. We continue to push for developing our resources, going back to exploration and drilling on our national lands, federal lands, as well as out in the Gulf, which at the time the policy was in place under the Trump administration, we were totally energy independent. Remember $1.79 a gallon gas? It's not that long ago, 4 years, but it's not that long ago that we were there. And now we get excited when we see it moving down to $3.39. On the way to church yesterday morning, I told my wife, way home from church, we gotta stop and get it at 3:39. Shouldn't be that way. So those are the issues that we're looking at. I think I've talked long enough to get some of the question cards filled out. The purpose of these meetings always is to have more time spent having your comments and your questions addressed than me just talking on and on. And answering your questions, I'll probably talk about what I want to talk about anyway. So, Dustin, if you've got some, let's start.
Mark from the row was well for 4 small modular reactors be enough energy to make up for the closure of the coal burning plants in the row.
Oh. I don't know. I know that nuclear power is coming along a long way. It's about time we consider small modular reactors, micro reactors. We've got them in ships and submarines years and years safely going around the waters of this world. We know that we have people that have been trained in the military at the very least who can run these. We know that it could work. But the bigger question is, why do we need to shut down that plant? That was significantly upgraded to the tune of $150 million just within the last 10 years. And we have a trained workforce there and clean coal technology. That is, in all honesty, because of that, been part of not only our energy solution in this country, but also cleaning up the environment. And so right now it's being pushed to be shut down. Having talked with the administration of DTE on that, it's not a foregone conclusion that it will go away as a facility that can be used. Could it be put to natural gas, which is the miracle energy source that has helped clean up our environment? The next 12 large manufacturing countries combined in the world, it takes all 12 of those to equal what we've done here in the United States in cleaning up the environment. We can't let these radical environmentalists give us an inferiority complex, because we shouldn't have that. Was that your question?
Yes, Mr. Walberg. Unfortunately, in 2018, Detroit Edison reneged on their property taxes on the coal burner and the nuclear plant by about 50%. And Detroit Edison is one of the few utilities that still has an active build permit for a nuclear reactor. The application was $300 million, and I assume that every year there's probably a fee to keep it active. It's just the most expensive electricity on the planet. Here we are in this greatest body of fresh water on the planet. We're storing high-level radioactive waste on the shore of Lake Erie and Lake Michigan. This is a problem, and Detroit Edison their taxes should be going up instead of down. My gosh.
Well, let me answer that. Well, I don't want taxes.
Let me finish up. We've got the First Solar in Perrysburg can manufacture 10,000 megawatts per year of solar panels.
Okay. Yeah, we've got all different sources, and my point is, let's innovate. What's doable, what's cost productive for us is what we want to see. We don't want government mandating what we have to do. That's never worked. In the auto industry, in agriculture, in energy. Speak for innovation.
Give freedom to do that. Give a basic standard to reach, whether it's cafe or otherwise. Give a basic, realistic standard and get out of the way. Let innovation take place. Tell you what, you can talk about the storage of nuclear waste. Well, why aren't we putting it in Yucca Mountain? Why? Because Democrat leadership have stopped us. Harry Reid.
Well, they had
Harry Reid.
an earthquake and they had
We have a lot of questions to get through.
Come on.
We got a lot of questions to get through.
Let's innovate, let's find a way to do it. If you don't want it stored on Lake Erie, I don't either. I don't wanna see those casks.
Good.
I don't wanna see the casks on Lake Michigan at my Cook facility. But we can't put it any place because radical environmentalists wanna keep us from doing something that will power our country. And nuclear power is good power, and we can produce it. It was interesting to be at COP28 just several months ago, the big climate conference there. And I'm part of the Conservative Climate Caucus. We felt that we've got too much garbage and untruth coming from the radical climate people, that we need to be there as well. And by going there ourselves for the past 3 years, we changed the talk at COP28. They were talking nuclear and they were talking natural gas. For the first time, John Kerry and I had a good debate and conversation over nuclear power and natural gas there at that event. So we can do it. I don't want to increase taxes. I want to reduce taxes. I want DTE to carry its fair share, but I want them allowed to innovate and provide you and me the energy needed. Because if we make it more difficult for the energy providers, who pays for it? We do. Next question.
John from Clinton writes, does the congressman actually believe the LGBTQ community should be put to death as he is in support of the law in Uganda?
No, I don't. Never have said that, never will. Next question.
Tim from Monroe writes, I would also add that our healthcare system is in crisis. It is near impossible for a chronic pain patient to get pain medicine, which drives them to other sources. The government's heavy hand to the opioid crisis is largely to blame. What, Congressman, can we do to address this?
I think one thing we need to look at, and I don't sit on the Health Subcommittee on Energy and Commerce, but they're looking at the whole issue of PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers. I just experienced that 2 weeks ago. Had a conjunctivitis in my eye, it closed. Dustin brought me home from speaking at Ducks Unlimited, and I had big red eye and puffy face. The doctor gave a prescription for me to use, took it to the pharmacy, came back and said, they won't cover this. Your insurance won't cover this. Pharmacy benefit manager says you have to use a generic, you can't use a, what do they call it, a brand. Number one, I was kind of glad I could use that brand because it was the cost was in the hundreds of dollars. But what was illustrative of that is saying that when we pay hundreds of dollars a year for insurance and then you go to use it, and your doctor says this is what you need, and your pharmacist wants to fill it, but they can't fill it because it's not the formulary that the PBM says you can have. We got a problem there. That raises costs, ultimately. And it provides less care for people. So that's something we need to do, and we need to encourage competition, further innovation, innovate for the world. Remember that. You might be able to get some things cheaper in Canada, but only 56% of our formularies are carried in Canada. We have more choices here. We also have more liability costs, malpractice insurance costs and claims that they don't have there because of socialized medicine. But that's also why you see Canadians come to the United States to get a lot of their cancer care and things like that. So, next question.
Jamie from Petersburg writes, would you please give us your opinion of Mike Johnson as Speaker?
Mike's a good guy, honest guy, true conservative, has a pedigree to show he's a true conservative. And sadly, he has to work with an untenable situation where right now, as of this coming week, we have a 1-vote majority. We can lose 1 vote from the Republican conference, and that puts us at really controlled by the Democrats. And then we have a person like MTG who gets in a snit and says, I'm gonna put forward a motion to vacate the chair. Fortunately, she didn't make it a privilege motion, so it doesn't have to come up. But why? Why? So, Mike's a good guy. He's a good Christian guy, consistent, wants to work within the system, wants to work according to rules, was elected by the majority overwhelmingly to be the next speaker after he took a good speaker out for who knows what reasons, personal reasons, of 8 legislators who decided to join all the Democrats and take him out. So that's what we deal with. Mike's a good guy.
Charles from Carlton writes, you're supposed to protect our rights and sovereignty. Why would you vote for a bill of 1,000 pages and not knowing what is in it? Either you're showing your dislike for the American people or ignorance. Shut down the border and let the government collapse. Stand the ground and stop voting with the world order.
Well, I tell you what, none of that's true. None of that's true. I read the bill. The person who wrote that probably listened to the media talking about regular order not being followed, that didn't do their homework to understand we had the bill. We just didn't have the CBO statement on it. That was it. That was why it was brought up under suspension of rules, which is part of our rules. We can bring up bills in specific circumstances as determined by the conference under suspension of rules, which suspends the rules and allows us to take action, in this case, earlier than the 72-hour general requirement. So we knew what was in the bill, and we voted on it. We didn't vote to hurt the border. We, in fact, in this legislation, which was a spending bill, we added 22,000 Customs and Border Patrol agents. We added over 10,000, I call them incarceration beds, that ought to be used. This gives Trump the opportunity when he becomes president to have those beds already there, because he will follow the rules on the border. He did that last time. We didn't have thousands, we didn't have hundreds charging the border. We didn't have the invasion that we saw last week. It wasn't taking place. So that was the good stuff that was in there. Sure, did it have some bad stuff? Yeah. When you have negotiations between the majority in the House, which is Republican, the majority in the Senate, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats, the majority in the White House, which is Biden, that's 1 to 2. For us to get all of the traditional values riders in there, including the Hyde Amendment on abortion and the rest, plus get border security increased. Now, that's not saying the president will use it. He's proved that he doesn't want to use it. But we got the language in. We reduced the entire budget over last year. That's something to say as well. And I'd like to ask the questioner of it, did you read the bill to know what was in there? I read the bill. There was nothing in there for Ukraine. There was the normal military funding that we do for Israel, but no increased funding for Israel. I think we ought to win in Ukraine, and I think we ought to win in Israel. I think Hamas ought to be wiped off the earth, and I think Putin ought to be defeated soundly. Now, if you disagree with me on that, we'll have to agree to disagree. Yes?
Paul from Ottawa Lake writes with a little attachment here. Last Wednesday, 170 members of the RSC recommends cuts to Social Security and Medicare. The Fiscal Sanity to Save America program, savings RSC proposes, would involve changes to Social Security, retirement age, reduction of benefits, it goes on and on.
Well, I say to Paul, we've discussed this before, the Republicans are on Social Security as well. Me too. I'm on Social Security and Medicare. I don't like either. But it's a promise that government made that if you involuntarily, remember that, it's a tax, you don't have a choice, you pay into it, this is what you get. And so it's a promise made, it's got to be kept. We also don't whistle past the graveyard, right? And get away with anything good. We have to identify the fact that we've got a problem. And the problem is we have too few people working and paying into Social Security. And if we don't change that by policies that encourage work and not welfare and entitlement programs, we're gonna have problem covering Social Security. So if we're serious, we've gotta take a look at what the problem is, the deficit that's looming. Medicare has already hit it. And how do we fix it so we keep the promise to people who have no choice, they're on Social Security, or those soon to be on Social Security? How do we fix it for the future, at least in the long term, and make sure that we keep the promise without looking for means by which we can take it? Paul, it was your question, so I'll let you add to it.
Okay, so.
For a short period of time.
The problem I'm seeing here is there's a lot of fraud in Medicare, and I'm gonna know what you're doing about the fraud. I think you should go after the fraud,
I think so too.
and we're not addressing that. And there's the Medicare Advantage programs are rife with fraud. You see it every day, and they spend a fortune on advertising. Why are we spending money, our Medicare dollars, on fraudulent ads to get people to sign up for these programs that really are
For Medicare Advantage,
for Medicare Advantage programs?
that's your choice.
No.
That's my choice, Advantage.
Yeah.
That's a rider to Medicare. That's why some people can survive on
But
Medicare.
it started with George Bush. He started with Medicare.
I like Medicare Advantage. It's my choice.
But in the end, when the last few years of your life, a lot of people they don't get their bills paid by Medicare Advantage because they put an insurance company between you and your doctor. And so I can argue about that all day.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, why can't you just take it, go after that? The Republican Party should go after that, reject their donors, go after the fraud, and Social Security, you wanna take and raise it to age 69, and then you wanna make Medicare a voucher program, where they're gonna take and pay you. This is what this Republican study committee come up with. They wanna pay you a set fee at the beginning of the year, and then you go out and shop for your own insurance. Well, as an elder person, you're not gonna get, you're not gonna get your bills paid if they go that route. So this is a problem.
If you had, let me, by show of hands, especially elder persons here, or approaching elder person. If you had money in your hands to shop for an insurance product, and you could make choices, you could change that. If you could do that, do you think you'd make a better choice than some government bureaucrat deciding for you? I see one hand. Paul, I don't think the majority of people are stupid enough to make ignorant decisions about their benefit, their health benefits. Now, there may be some, but I don't think government is supposed to protect people against themselves for everything. I'd much rather have a choice, if that's what it says. And I don't know.
I'm asking you, what are you doing about the fraud in Medicare?
We've done investigations in it, we've pushed bills through already to deal with fraud in Medicare. Some of those have passed in legislative packages and sit in the Senate right now. You have to ask Chuck Schumer why he won't take up good bills that we've sent him already that will deal with things like that.
And they want to take away competitive bidding on drugs, which Biden had passed. And so he's going down that road of why are we paying the highest rates for our drugs in the world?
And I'll ask you, after Biden's proposal passed, have we gotten reduced costs?
We do on a few drugs, insulin and other drugs, but there's a.
Let's go to the next question.
John from Dundee writes, my wife and son are backlogged in the U.S. immigration system due to, I assume, all the influx of illegal aliens. I feel we are doing it the right way, but we are at 1 year plus mark and are at their mercy. Do you have any recommendations to speed up our case?
Well, you can call our office. We'll do our best to cut through some of the red tape and find out why. I have a son-in-law that it's been now 19 months. He's been trying to get his I-130 visa to come here. My daughter and granddaughters, we finally brought them home. They're missionaries. My son-in-law is African. So he has to go through the visa process. This should have taken 6 months. Then it was moved to 9.5 months. Then it was moved to 15 months. And now, like I said, it's been 19 months. He's still waiting for his interview in Nairobi, Kenya, you'll have to fly there, have an interview at the American Embassy to finally get it. We're waiting for it.
We're in country already, and we had our interview over the 1 year mark. So we
Yeah.
thought, wham, bam, it's gonna happen quick.
And
All this stuff slowed it down, so.
a lot of your federal employees are still, and we passed legislation on this in the House, it sits in the Senate, requiring all federal workers to go back.
Question form or not?
75% of the office spaces in the US Capitol right now are vacant from their government employees that you're paying for. So the legislation we passed says you come back, or we sell the building. So that's the challenge, when you have people that are working from home on issues like this that you just can't get done by passing. I mean, if you're in the same office space, you pass that paper on to the next person. You sign those things, you move it through. If those people are at home, then the process is slowed down. And it's a joke to say it, it'd be easier to just come across the border. Illegally.
Yeah.
My son-in-law could do that, but that wouldn't serve him well for the future.
At the interview, I asked our interviewer for his contact information. No, you don't contact them, they
Call our
contact
office.
you.
And I saw
Thank you.
Dustin
We will.
glad to do our best.
Why is it easier to come across the border than the Canadian? Why you can't get across the Canadian
Well, it's
border?
coming across the Canadian now. We've got real challenges. Our northern border has become extremely porous. The type of drugs and potentially the terrorists that are coming across.
You can't get across that one, you have to break. I mean,
If you're coming across the bridge,
yeah.
but they're not coming across the bridge.
Now you don't want to come across the river.
You've got personal submarines that are coming across, handheld things coming across, drugs. We've been out on the, with Customs and Border Patrol in the air as well as on the boats, the swift boats. It's amazing, the creativity of how people get across. But then think of the northern border that goes, it's our longest border and most porous border. What's coming across? North of Minnesota, North Dakota, Montana.
I'll read these three questions, they're very similar. Tom from Monroe writes, how can Republicans pass a $1.2 trillion bill with the following poor 15 million, Egyptian college, 85,000 gay senior home, 500K DEI, et cetera, goes on. Richard from Highland writes, are you a conservative, yes or no? This is not a trick question, yes, how can you vote for 1.7 trillion in spending? Yvonne says, from Monroe, we still have a tiny majority in the House, why do we always cave into the Senate Dems?
Well, I'm a conservative. Those entities, conservative entities, are late conservatives. Great means the number one most conservative member of Michigan Gov't. That's lifetime rate. And high time. Also understand that we have to govern. And when you negotiate for governing, some people say shutdowns work. Let me just. Federal government shutdown since 1990. Let me just give you a few points on it. Number one, they never work. It always costs us more to open up government. And then if you add the lost productivity in it, including getting visas for people like this, or my son-in-law, or others, then you add the cost as well. But just President Trump, this was the longest shutdown that I've been in. It was 36 days. And he made a statement earlier on, and I don't always agree with Trump's statements. His policies I like pretty much. Yeah, Bill Chuck Schumer said, blame me for it. I'll take the blame. Well, again, in the budget bill, the original budget bill, there was $5.7 billion for the wall along the US border. $5.7 billion. After 36 days, Trump signed into law the spending bill that was ultimately given to him after the shutdown, and we opened it up. It provided $1.375 billion for 55 miles of fencing for the border. So he went from what he could have had, and yes, there's some garbage in it. You read some things about LGBTQ stuff, that was put in the Senate, not put in the House. He ended up with 1.3 as opposed to 5.7. So if we're looking at just that one issue, that's the type of stuff that I've seen in the 3 shutdowns I've experienced over the 15 years that I've been in Congress. It never works. When you shut something down, for instance, the military families, they won't receive their pay after the shutdown. They'll get it restored to them when we open up again. But that's not saying too much when a family has to go without until we get our act together and then get it restored.
Does Congress get paid though?
They can. I've always submitted a letter to have my pay held till we open up again.
Well, we know you would, but what about the rest of the people?
I think most of the Republicans do. Can't speak for the Democrats, you'd have to ask a Democrat on that. But we have a letter that's provided for us to sign, give it to the clerk of the House, that will withhold ours.
Don't you think it'd be better if it was mandatory, you guys wouldn't get paid, would force you guys to actually do something?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. We ought to have enough willingness to do what we're asked to do. We have to pass a budget. That's required in the Constitution. We shouldn't need anything like that. Shutdowns sound good, but when your pork, if you're a farmer, when your hogs can't be certified by an FDA inspector, and Clements packaging plant in Coldwater has to shut down because they don't have FDA inspectors in there, and the guy who's bringing truckloads of hogs every week can't unload those hogs, you're gonna have problems. When the military doesn't get paid, you're gonna have problems. When you don't have inspectors for products at General Motors, building cars, the auto dealers have problems. Why don't we just do the job? We know that in divided government, there has to be compromise. I don't see compromise as an evil term. I see that there's a red line in compromise that I can't go past. But I've had a marriage now of almost 50 years because Sue was willing to compromise. Or was it the other way around? I was willing. Come on, folks, smile a little bit. We're still in America. Gee whiz.
Question.
So that's what I'm saying. One point, we reduced the overall spending with this legislation from last year. We reduced it. We cut significant dollars. Let me read a few of those to you. Not enough. Absolutely. Tell me how we get more.
Get rid of the Department of Education.
How do we get rid of it?
Make it go away.
Whew.
We have a problem with an administrative state in this country.
I do too.
Realize it or not.
I do too.
Okay,
How are we
so
gonna change that?
You can defund them. Congress has the purse strings. You can defund all of the agencies if you want to.
Sure. Is Chuck Schumer gonna do that?
Somebody has.
Is Joe Biden gonna sign it?
Somebody in power has.
Somebody.
When
Somebody.
the Republicans
But-
had control of Congress, there was nothing done to handcuff the administrative state or defund them. Now these agencies are weaponized against their own people.
I wish you could have seen the Department of Education when Betsy DeVos was there under the Trump administration and the cuts that the Republican majority gave that allowed her, and allowed me to walk through the Department of Education, see cubicle after cubicle after cubicle that was empty. But what happened? After we did that, who took the majority in the Senate and who took the majority in the White House? Who? Answer me that question.
How about election integrity then? We have plenty
Okay,
of,
folks,
we
get
have
back
plenty
on
of
track
voters
here.
here, we have
Folks,
a
wait
lot
a
of
second.
questions to get through.
Wait a
There's
second.
plenty of voters that.
Let me just
their
say
vote doesn't
something.
count.
It's easy to sit in the back row and say all of this has to be done. When in fact,
Sooner or later, we have to.
the electorate has to wake up.
We have to start.
The electorate has to wake up and put people in power to do it. With a one-vote majority, I mean, come on, folks. Let me, cut spending. State and foreign operations, in what we just passed Friday. 6% cut from fiscal year 23. Financial services and general government, 4% cut from fiscal year 23. Legislative branch, 2.2% cut from fiscal year 23. Labor, health, human services, 1% cut from fiscal year 23. Defense, 27 billion increase over fiscal year 23. The largest pay increase for our military families in 40 years. We needed it. Homeland Security, $1.3 billion increase over fiscal year 23. Those increases came even though Chuck Schumer and the Democrats and the White House opposed them. It's simple to get this done if you have an overwhelming majority. It's not simple to get it done if the voter has given us a split government to the side of the Democrats. For conservatives are sitting in this room, you got to think that through. And you can complain about election integrity, but then get 2 more people for your 1 vote to go to the polls this time. Overwhelm the polls with conservatives.
How do we get conservatives to the polls when you won't hold the line and vote the way we need you to? You could have voted no on that budget bill and held the line for the conservatives in your conservative district.
And we're going to go on
You would
next
motivate
questions,
people
but I'm
to
going to
go
answer that.
and work and
I'm
get
going to answer
Republicans
that.
elected.
I held the line for conservatives.
Not
We
you.
cut
No,
spending.
you didn't. No, you didn't.
Okay, I didn't.
Jonda from Dundee writes, please address the issue of.
Vote for a Democrat next time. See what you get.
Jonda from Dundee writes, please address the issue of Michigan as a border state and the problems involved.
Michigan is a border state. Every state in the union is a border state. Every state in the union is a border state. Why? Because of the policies of this administration. When you allow aggressive movement across the border, what are you going to get? When you allow people to come through in busloads and they're given packets that allow them to get on a train or plane and go any place in the United States, including Michigan. Star Commonwealth is filled up with children who are trafficked across the border at huge expenses paid by parents and others to get them across the cartels. They're here. We're a border state. Our northern border, our border with our Great Lakes and the Detroit River is a border. We've got 22 agents at the Detroit Customs and Border Patrol office that are assigned to support the Border Patrol agents in Eagle Pass and McAllen, Texas, to give them information, background material. So as long as we have an administration in place that was elected to be the administration in place, whether it was fraud or what, they're still there. This is what's going to happen. That hasn't changed. And when the president says, and Mayorkas says the border is secure, they're lying to you. You can see that. So again, folks, it comes down to you not sucking your thumb about what happened in the past, but saying we're going to take America back. Yep.
Lewis from Dundee writes, gold standard reset.
I would support it. How you get it done is the next question. To go back to a gold standard after we've been away for it for this many years. Right now, we just want to stop inflation. We want to stop the spending that this administration is doing. If we can do that, we'll serve ourselves pretty well. Then if we can get back to the gold standard, that'd be great. But right now, I wanna make sure that the dollar remains the world currency and not the yuan, or any other currency, including digital currency.
Will from Erie writes, what if anything can be done about Michigan paying households $500 a month to house illegals? Does this violate any federal statute?
No, they're generally using federal dollars. No, it doesn't violate any federal statute. If it did, it would be stopped. That's the trouble. Right now, a country in crisis is because of losing control.
It's not federal money, it's our money. So it should be illegal. I mean, it's our money. We pay taxes.
You and I
own a
won't-
business
you and I
here
won't debate that.
In Dundee, I'm paying out my ass just to have that place open every single month.
You and I don't debate that at all.
And,
But the dollars have gone to Washington, we better change that.
Well, the SBA, they're pushing SBA loans to keep the business open during COVID. I took it. Now I'm getting in the, you know what? Because I'm paying 9.5%. It's a freaking credit card. Through the government. 9.5%.
If I were you, I'd never taken that loan, the SBA loan.
No shit.
Brad
Sorry.
from Milan writes, motorcycles are not part of the discussion on roads for electric power. Electric power doesn't work for most of us. How do you pass laws without technologies to implement them?
The people that we elect do that. And again, I go back to the beauty and the challenge of this governmental system is that it's a republic. A republic is a constitutional democracy. And a democracy that's a constitutional democracy can only be kept at the will of the people. And if the will of the people doesn't keep it up, this is what happens. Now, on electric power for motorcycles, seeing some debate members in the room, I chair the motorcycle caucus in the House. And we've been keeping an eye on autonomous vehicles, especially to make sure that we're not run over by autonomous vehicles. On electrification, it's a general policy, a bill that I passed, sent to the Senate, the CARS Act, which takes away any mandate on the type of vehicle you have to drive, including a motorcycle. If you want an ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine vehicle, you should be allowed to have that. If you want to drive an EV car or motorcycle, and there are electric motorcycles out there, including one made by Harley, you can do that, but it ought to be your choice. And so the effort that we put in place, and I think we're seeing some win on it, is to say that until we have the infrastructure in place, the mandate can't be fully carried out. Now, last week, the EPA initiated its rule. They moderated a bit to say that by 2032, all new vehicles sold, 2/3 of them had to be electric. Now that could include 13% being hybrid, plug-in hybrids. My question is, why didn't you just let that be part of the solution? By the time that comes into place, Biden will not be in office anymore. May not even be alive by that time. And so there's opportunity to change it. We're gonna keep pushing for that. Again, we've seen even this winter, Teslas that couldn't be charged during the cold snap in Chicago when they were sitting there waiting to be charged while they were making calls to their friends and family members, come drive your internal combustion engine and pick us up until we get back and get it charged.
Pat from Adrian writes, would you be opposed to raising the $160,000 a year cap on Social Security taxes instead of raising the age limit to 69?
Well, I think we ought to look at all things. We ought to look at all things and make sure the promise is kept. We're living longer. We're working longer. Is 69 the wrong way to go? I think we ought to be looking at that. $160,000 cap. I mean, most extremely wealthy people, in all honesty, could care less about Social Security because it's a pimple in what they have for their retirement savings anyway. But in America, are you willing to treat somebody differently just because they succeed? That's a question I ask. That's a question we all ought to ask. America was always based on the fact that we want you to succeed. We want more millionaires and billionaires in this country than less. Why don't we incentivize that by simply saying, we're gonna treat you equally? That's a question you have to ask as well. And I think it's a legitimate question.
Is 168,000 still wealthy?
Huh?
Is $168,000 a year was still considered wealthy?
Well, not anymore sadly, but I think in my
There you go.
opinion, that's way, way above the mean average of wealth.
So you're probably the 1% then, your income, right? You're probably the one, and you're in District 5, you're probably the 1%.
I probably
And then
am.
you talk about social.
We got some questions here to get through, Paul.
Well, you didn't read my
Respect-
question.
I already did, yours was
You
one of the
didn't read
first
whole
ones.
thing. You didn't
Let's
read
go on
well-
to the next question, Paul.
Tom from Dundee writes, I'm 74 years old, a veteran. I went to purchase a firearm for protecting at Cabela's. They told me that I had to have a firearms purchase permit and get it at the sheriff's office. I did and was charged $8. Do you see this as an infringement on the Second Amendment?
Absolutely. Say that again, absolutely. I'm of the position that any infringement, any requirement to register my weapons or to have any regulatory policy on my weapons except the wrongful use is an infringement on the Second Amendment. Read the Second Amendment. Does it have an addendum that says, as per regulated by the government? Read the Second Amendment language in our state constitution, which is even stronger than the federal Second Amendment.
Why doesn't the Supreme Court strike all these
Now, some people,
Yeah.
we're going through questions. You had a chance to write it down.
I know.
Okay, you got it?
Questions come up as you talk.
Yeah. I'm normally not this abrasive,
I know.
but this crowd is a little abrasive right now.
Well,
So I'm gonna push back.
We're
I grew
being
up
money.
I grew up on the south side of Chicago, okay? The south side, the true south side. I learned to fight early in life. I wrestled in high school and college, so bring her on. But I'm also a wonderful, loving guy also.
Did you fight a 98 word pop?
But when you get the Second Amendment, you get the Constitution, you can get my hackles up pretty quick. When I was in the state legislature, I fought for no requirement to have any type of firearm. I was opposed to putting any shall issue or training class. And I think training is wonderful. I take advanced training on a motorcycle occasionally to see if there's any newer idea. That's why 55 years of riding a motorcycle, I'm still alive. I love it. Same with the weapons. If we went after the criminals, almost got a Baptist to swear, but if we went after the criminals for violating firearm law and locked them up, we'd change things, but we don't. The poor police arrest these people and they know they're gonna be kicked out on the street. So why? You know? So when you get on the Second Amendment, look at the Second Amendment, what it says. It's not for hunting. It's not for target practice. It's not for defense. It's for all of the above. It's a free American's right to keep and bear arms. And it's not for a militia. That person can be part of a militia, and probably because they believe in Second Amendment rights to be a better part of a militia or the military. But it's a Second Amendment to the Constitution. It's not an opinion. And it protects the First Amendment. Yes, Dustin, let's go on to the next
All
question.
right. Holly writes about the the funding bill, and why vote for funding the Red Flag Commission to attack our Second Amendments?
But we put provisions in that bill to protect Second Amendments. We put provisions in to take DEI out of the military. We put amendments in that bill to take drag queen shows out of the military and out of the schools. I can't help it that Chuck Schumer and Democrats in the Senate had a say too, and put some of those things in there. But we also reduced spending year over year. We also put wonderful riders in there to protect our freedoms. We gave us a chance that next year, if the electorate votes right, and I'll be honest, if they vote the way I would like them to vote, we'll be able to do more. But until then, we can either show the American public that the Republicans can't govern by shutting down and doing nothing, and thinking that that's going to change anything, other than the independents who will say, well, why should I vote for Republicans? They can't govern. They can't even get any wins. And that's where we come to this point. Now, it's easy to be angry and talk about what you would do, not thinking about what it means to have 434 other members of Congress, and then a whole 100 more in the Senate. And then a guy in the White House who says, I will sign or not sign. That's the beauty of our government. It's slow. And sometimes the slowness is frustrating. Sometimes it protects us against worse things. Just think if we hadn't passed the 16th Amendment of the Constitution in this country and ratified that, we wouldn't have the IRS and the income tax. Just think if we hadn't sold the bill of goods that we needed to have a popular vote for our U.S. senators, just like the U.S. House members. When if we'd read the Federalist Papers of those that wrote the Constitution, they said the only way states will have any power in the federal government is having U.S. senators elected by the legislature, not by a general population. But we changed that in the 17th Amendment. We said, we want to elect a senator too. So now we got Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters, and they represent Detroit. They don't represent Monroe. They don't represent Tipton, where I live. They don't represent the smaller communities. So the large communities in all the states get representation in the Senate. But we were sold a bill of goods, just like we were sold a bill of goods about redistricting. And now we pay for it. 40% pay increase. The redistricting commission in Michigan gave themselves last week. 40%. They meet once a month. And they screwed up the first one. So now they got to try to redo it. And I could go on and on about what we do to ourselves at times.
Todd from South Rockwood writes, was the budget bill a principled bill?
Parts of it were. Parts of it was a principled bill. I think the cuts in spending year over year, yes. The doing away with DEI. The doing away with drag shows. The increasing of Border Patrol agents. The increase of incarceration beds. Those were principal things. We wanted border security. We could only make certain steps. We got those done. We paid our military, increased their pay. And I could go through a bunch more, but yeah. A budget bill is 1,000 pages long because it takes in multiple departments of state. The House requirement in the rules for all other bills are single issue bills. And we've kept that. But appropriations bills, they have to be, by fact that they have entire departments in it, have to be larger. So you get some good stuff in it, you get some bad. You have to decide which is good and which is bad. And also in this case, you have to decide whether you're gonna govern.
Did you vote against the appropriation consolidation of 2023?
Let's go on to the next question.
Dr. Stephen from Ann Arbor writes, Senator Bernie
Oh,
Sanders.
you'll never give up, I love you.
Well, no, I know you
Good to
voted
see you.
against it, but then you're out
Good to
spending
see
his
you.
money.
Dr.
And
Stephen
the
from Ann Arbor writes, Senator Bernie Sanders wants to transfer $200 billion over 5 years from the ACA Prevention Fund to community health centers. Senator Bill Cassidy, this is something. Michigan uses prevention fund money to combat violent crime, drug deaths, prevent obesity. Appreciate your COVID funding for these centers, but where's the balance? How would you advise your Senate colleagues on Bernie Sanders' actions?
Vote no. Anything on Bernie Sanders, vote no. That's a simple one. He's a socialist.
And this last one, are U.S. troops being deployed to Gaza, Israel to build a port?
I would say they are. The president says that they're not. I don't know how you build a port. He says it's gonna be all on the water, but once that's hooked up, that becomes fair game. So you're putting our troops in harm's way. Probably Seabees, others that are gonna be doing that engineering policy. I don't see how you possibly could say that that isn't putting our troops in harm's way in Gaza, where we shouldn't be. We should be resourcing Israel just like they want to kill Hamas on their own.
Mr. Walberg, I asked that question. The reason I asked is because I was with a gentleman that's in the U.S. Army, he's a diver, yesterday, and he said he's being deployed on April 1st to go to Gaza to build a pier, and they're going to be protected by the IDF while they're there. They're there for a minimum of 90 days or until the project is finished. Why are we spending our money to build a port for them?
Yeah, it's Joe Biden's reason. We need to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. I don't think we should. I don't think any of our aid that goes to Israel to support our greatest ally, arguably maybe in the world, to defeat Hamas and Iran and Russia, and probably North Korea's in there and China too, with them and helping Hamas. We shouldn't be spending a dime on humanitarian aid. It should be like Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Get it over quick. The same should be in Ukraine. Defeat Putin quick. Instead of 80% of our funding for Ukraine being used for humanitarian purposes, it should be 80%, 100% to wipe out Russian forces, if that's what we want to do.
We haven't fought a real war since World War II.
Well, there's a lot of people died in wars that were not classified as real wars, but they were real wars to those people.
I mean, we didn't fight to win.
You got through all the questions and we're out of time, but speaking
I got
of,
2 more minutes.
but speaking of proud veterans, Ken Moore has a question for you.
Ken?
Ken from Monroe.
My name's Ken Moore, Vietnam veteran. My friend Walberg, 31 years in the Army. Is there any veterans here? Then you know what we went through. Back in 2019, I started Flags Over Veterans. You're probably not aware of what it is. We had a lot of cemeteries in Monroe County that didn't have a tall flag over it. Every cemetery now has a tall flag. I was at a meeting down in Temperance, and this man walked in, wanted to know who Ken Moore was, and he's standing in the back dusting. He presented me with a flag. I love that flag. This man here gave me 40 flags that flew over the Capitol. And they're on your cemetery.
You all pay for them.
I don't care who pays for it. Your cemeteries now have a tall flag. This is for you, sir.
stores in Washington. Now we can put one in my district office in Jackson as well. So, yeah, I mean, this is evidence that America has been willing to fight for freedoms. And sometimes those are in other lands. I encourage you today to stop and think what you're willing to fight for. I mean, fight to win, not just fight, but to fight to win. I've had Army Rangers tell me that the common theme for them is forward movement always allows other opportunities to develop. Never stand still and never retreat. Though they told me as well that certain times retreat is forward movement to give you a chance for the strategy to work in a different way. That's what America has to be. I'm not serving at 73 years of age just because I want to. I feel it a calling. And the majority of this district, strong majority, has asked me to do that. And I don't expect everybody to agree with me, even in my own party, or my own family. But we all have a purpose in America. It's a simple purpose. To hold on to this country as the last semblance of what true freedom is about. We celebrate 250 years in 2026. That's not far away. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard that democracies generally only live 250 years. I don't know what that says to you, but I know what it says to me. And I can say, because we are not a democracy, we're a republic, that maybe we have a better chance of surviving beyond 250 years, but I'm not going to bet on that. Unless we're willing to be smart and principled and disciplined. And that's why I'm concerned about some of my colleagues in Washington on my side of the aisle. I won't talk about the other side, the squad and all of the rest. But people that just want to talk, get the clicks out there, get on the media, and raise the funds. And boy, do they raise the funds, MTG being one. Why? Which he would detract from our battle to restore this republic by throwing things up in the air again for removing another speaker. What good does that do? Say that to the Democrat side as well. Somehow we got to find a way to move forward. It's easy, sometimes we just think of our own priorities to think how we would do it. But 434 districts represent members of the state, of the U.S. House of Representatives. 434. So when I look around, and my seniority is 97 now, well, with people that are retired and left early, I'm probably down to about 92 out of 435 in seniority. And I look at all of that and I say, how in the world has this country survived so long? With citizens that think it's so easy, and members that come for various purposes other than continuing the republic. So that's our quest. 2026, 250 years. 250 years. Democracies die. Do we want history to record that America was one of those that made it to 250 years and slightly beyond maybe, and then was gone? Because it's people, I'm part of that. I just represent the district. Its people gave it away. For whatever reason, it's not good enough to give it away. Whatever reason you have, it's not good enough to give it away. That's why I also say, after the years of experience, whatever reason you want to shut down government just because it feels good, or we'll get them to give in. I can tell you from experience, it won't. Will Bruck is getting, where'd you go, Will? There, getting more experience day by day in the State House. Your ideas and opinions will change over that time by seeing reality. The basic bottom line philosophy needs to stay the same. Same's been with me. And so that's why we do town hall meetings like this, so we can have questions, and frankly, I'm glad to see more sides than just one. Some of my town halls now, because of my new district, they're just boring. We're all on agreement. So Paul, I'm glad to see you back.
Well, I never get an invitation.
We got here today.
You only have an invitation only, event. I heard this through the grapevine.
That's absolutely false.
But it is,
I will add,
how many people in here got invitations? Raise your hand.
I also called it.
Oh, I got some in the mail, that's not really an invitation,
you
but.
got the mail, that's it.
It's in the
That's
mail.
all you're gonna get.
In the mail.
We're gonna get
I
it.
assume
We're over
everybody
time
got
here,
one.
but
Yeah.
Representative Jim DeSantis is here as well.
Jim, I didn't recognize you under that
I
hat.
had my cap
Oh,
on,
there you go.
no worries. I stayed in the back.
Good to see you. I mean, the bottom line is, these are open meetings. And we do our best we can through a calling service and mailing service to get it out. Some of you change your addresses, some of you change your phone numbers, some of you make them unlisted.
Well, you used to have it on events, you had events online.
We
You
don't
don't,
do
now it's
that.
past events, you never have,
We
you never give notice.
We don't do that. The number of threats I have in my life, the SWATs at my house, and all of
Is that what Debbie Dingle does? She never has any problem with that.
She doesn't do town halls.
She has town halls everywhere.
No, she doesn't. I lived in Newport 25
She doesn't
years.
have town
Was
halls.
never invited.
Not like this.
Thanks for coming. He'll be in Jackson this afternoon doing the town hall.